I think there's a fine line between when people are like, I want to become this new identity. I want to become someone who does this, a new person. I'm more so like when I hear that, I'm like, well, that's probably who you already are. We want to look at all the reasons why you aren't that, right? What has gotten in the way? So I like hypnosis for that because it creates a safe space for your body. We create the internal environment for that ideal most abundant timeline, as I call it. And so what needs to be built within our system to feel resilient to the discomfort or to the pushback of whatever might be coming through.
Welcome to Feed Your Wild, an immersive journey to help you remember your own medicine and awaken your intuitive healing gifts. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join us for heart-centered, real conversations exploring intuition and spirituality, health and wellness, astrology, herbalism, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and life. Our mission is to inspire, empower you, and help you expand your spiritual and intuitive connection to its fullest expression so that we can build a more beautiful world together. Get ready to feed all parts of your wild self. Do you ever feel like you are self-sabotaging? Like you have these programs running, you can't quite break through. No matter how much you try, all the things that you actively do don't seem to be working. You can desire something so much, and yet it hasn't happened yet. You can feel yourself being held back, but you're not quite sure what it's actually about. And even if you do, maybe your attempts at moving through, pushing through, taking action, and trying all the things despite how you feel still are not working. And you're not seeing the things that you desire manifest in your life. You're not able to show up in the way that you desire because of being held back. Now, if you are human, then you absolutely have subconscious programming. This is just part of the gig, right? As an earthly being with a powerful mind. And our mind is so powerful and magical, so much so that we can hold ourselves back if at a subconscious level there is some perceived danger or threat to actually getting the very thing you desire. I have seen this countless times. I've experienced this myself when it comes to being a healer, and specifically a spiritual and intuitive healer. Many of these blocks could be thrown under this umbrella called the witch wound, which refers to the memory that we still hold, either on an individual, ancestral, or collective level, of the danger of being seen as a healer, whether it was past lives during the witch trials, or the untold number of healers and beautiful souls who were utilizing their magic, who were persecuted, who were victimized, who were killed because of who they were and the work that they did. This is really big. And we can also experience remnants of this in our current life experience as children. Maybe you were made fun of. Maybe if you were seen as who you really were, you weren't accepted. Maybe you had a fear of being ostracized. Maybe you saw that firsthand. There's so much that goes into this kind of programming that ultimately is really trying to protect us. But in that valiant effort, it can feel like self-sabotaging because we can't fully step into our wholeness and who we really are and what we're supposed to do here in this lifetime on Earth. There are many other kinds of programmings and beliefs that have come up in my work with people, and in specifically the Wild Intuitive Practitioner pathway. That's my 9-month practitioner mentorship and mastermind. So I get an inside look into what healers, and specifically intuitive healers, are struggling with. What are their biggest challenges? And what are the beliefs that so many hold? That's why I invited Nathaly Granja onto the podcast today, and also inside of our container as a guest mentor. So Nathaly came inside of WHIP to teach on, of all things, making money as a healer, creating a revenue blueprint to start making money. And let me tell you, a lot came up around this topic after the class. There was a really amazing discussion about all the feels that come up when we tap into making money as a healer or a spiritual entrepreneur, and making really good money. There clearly are many feels that can come up for people around this topic. And so I wanted Nathaly to come back onto the podcast to share what some of the top sabotaging spirals healers and spiritual entrepreneurs face. Nathaly has a unique perspective and view on this because she herself is an intuitive healer, has been for many years, and mentors other intuitive healers and spiritual entrepreneurs. Her focus is on the business side of things, but she incorporates a holistic view and modalities. Her specialty is working with the unconscious or subconscious realms and energetically aligning to what she calls your most abundant timeline. I'm a huge fan of hypnosis, have used it both personally and in my professional service. So I was excited to try out Nathaly's program, the Granja Vortex Method, GVM as she calls it, which teaches you how to create customized hypnotic tracks, utilizing the principles that she uses in her work. I have done so and created tracks for the Wild Intuitive Practitioner pathway, and additionally, I've created my own tracks, personal tracks that I use myself. I mentioned this in the podcast, and at the time of this interview, I hadn't created them yet, but I have now, and I've been working with them, and it's so interesting. This is the first time that I have created my own hypnotic tracks and listening to my own voice in this way. And I got to tell you, there is resistance there. It's very interesting to see all the ways that my beautiful, magical mind is trying to avoid or resist change that I consciously desire. But of course, at a subconscious level, we have these programmings. So resistance is so normal, and it's going to be present. It's going to come up when you're doing this deep work. I see this all the time inside of WHIP. So really being gentle with yourself and knowing that it's a totally normal part of the process. I'm so glad to have Nathaly on today to talk about this resistance, to talk about the experience in these sabotage spirals. It's so important to bring awareness to them, to name them, so that we know what's happening and we know what to do about it. Now, before I get into what we talk about in this episode, I just wanted to share a quick announcement. I'm very excited to be sharing a new free masterclass that I'm putting together. Now, the topic of this one came to me while I was connecting with my guides, and they made it very clear that it is time that we all activate this very thing that I'm going to talk about and teach on, and that is unlocking your intuitive channeling gifts with clarity and confidence. Intuitive channeling is not just about what you might think of as psychic or trance channeling, like a medium who's channeling a spirit. That's one form of channeling. But what we are talking about is intuitive channeling as it pertains to your unique gifts, your unique channel, and that it's an absolutely normal process. So demystifying intuitive channeling, but also elevating your intuitive healing potential by tapping into those intuitive channeling gifts and mastering the art of intuitive readings. Accurate intuitive readings. It is an art. There's a precision and a process. And it's very clear that we are being called to step even more deeply into alignment with our gifts so that we can bring them forth into the world, make a bigger impact. Now, there was so much that was coming through as I intuitively channeled this topic, this process, and I cannot wait to share it with you. I'm going to be hosting this masterclass live on October 24th. That's a Tuesday, October 24th. You can sign up for it at wildlyrooted.com/channeling. wildlyrooted.com/channeling. The link is also in the show notes, of course. And even if you can't make it live, sign up so that you get the replay. On October 24th, I'm also going to be making an announcement about the Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway. And so I'll be talking a little bit about WIP inside of the masterclass, but there's going to be so much that we're going to be sharing and talking about, and I would love your participation. There most likely will be an impromptu intuitive channeling session there on the spot. There absolutely is going to be transmissions coming through. So while I have a lot that's planned, I also keep space for the unplanned, the unseen, and what wants to come through divinely in that moment with that particular energy of the collective who has signed up. So if this feels interesting to you, again, go ahead over to wildlyrooted.com/channeling, and I'll see you in class. All right, so in this episode with Nathaly, we get into, of course, the challenges faced by healers and spiritual entrepreneurs that are at a subconscious level. That can look like nervousness about your lack of experience or struggles with marketing and messaging, identifying a specific audience versus trying to help everyone. Because as you know, most healers are generalists and the work that they can do can help so many people. We talk about working from a place of ego versus your soul self, the pressure that one might feel to heal clients quickly, solve all their problems, and of course, the concept of the witch wound or the visibility wound, and fears around judgment or failing or feeling like you're not doing enough. Nathaly shares the tools that she loves and uses to create safety and overcome fear, to find security and trust one's path in this work, and to build resilience as you move through these very common limiting patterns. At the end of the day, it's about respect and sacred reciprocity and owning your gifts in all of who you are. So if any of this is resonating with you, if you're feeling like, ooh, we just struck a chord, or you're feeling a little attacked, I promise you, there's going to be something in here for you. And it's my prayer that tuning into these, bringing awareness and light to some of these sabotage spirals and patterns will spark the process of deprogramming, deconditioning so you can move beyond them. We would love to hear from you and how this episode lands. So please reach out to us over on Instagram. I'm at Wildly Rooted. I'll put Nathaly's handle in the show notes, and tag us or DM. We want to hear how this is landing and which one of these sabotage spirals you feel like you're currently in. We would love to know. All right, y'all, I'm going to stop talking and get into this amazing interview with Nathaly. Here we go. I am so thrilled to welcome Nathaly Granja on the podcast. Nathaly is an Oracle CEO and hypnotist with 10 years of client experience. Before moving to the online space, she had been featured on ABC and CBS, working with high profile leaders in Washington, D.C. as their Reiki master teacher and hypnotist. And I'm sure they needed it. They continue to need it in D.C. Over the last 5 years, Nathaly has been the go-to Oracle and hypnotist for VIP coaches and millionaire masterminds, whom she has helped scale from their first 10K to their first 100K month and counting. Nathaly is the creator of the Granja Vortex Method, a certification program blending energy work and unconscious reprogramming into customized hypnotic tracks. Today, she works with entrepreneurial leaders, healers, and disruptors by guiding their shadow, psychic gifts, and business strategy into a new state of being, their most abundant timeline. Nathaly, I just imagine like people applauding, yay, welcome to the Future Wild show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Well, in the pre-recording, I had mentioned that we had you on as a guest mentor for the Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway. That was an amazing class. Lots and lots of ahas from our students. And it was the thread, because every time we have a guest mentor class, I have the posting about it, but then I post the replay and I put it in our forum like, hey, you guys, there's an announcement, the replay is available. And that post had probably some of the most engaging activity of all posts in, which just kind of tells you, I knew this going in, but when we talk about money, because you were talking about creating a revenue blueprint to start making money, and as a healer, there is so much there. There's so much there to not just the fleshing out of what is even a revenue blueprint and how do I incorporate that, but then all of the beliefs and the feels that start to bubble up around that. So I thought you really lit a lot of people up in a wonderful way. And thanks again for coming on to share all that.
Oh my gosh, of course. Yeah, it's always so interesting to teach something like that to a group of healers because I never know where people are in their journey of, in their relationship to money, to abundance, to their business. And so it's interesting because as healers, we are sort of taught like no other format other than to like book a session with me, $130, book this with me, this amount of price. And to sort of introduce this idea that like you don't have to do time for money and that it's actually oftentimes even better for your client to create like courses or master classes or PDFs or something that's like still going to be super informative and educational to your client, but doesn't require you to be live right before they have to get on a call with you. And that contact with you and your presence and your insight to their work should be revered in a way that is shown financially, right? Like the exchange gets to match that level of intensity for the transformation. And it shouldn't just be the bottom tier of working with you. So yeah, it's always interesting to see people's responses because I think I think a lot of people will say, yes, this feels true. This feels good. While others are like, I can't even wrap my head around like how that could be possible to, be paid monthly for my services or something like that.
Totally. And I want to bring in, I took some clips and notes from some of the discussion because I think some of them had very good questions and just sort of perspectives and their own experience. So I want to get into that. But first, I'd love to explore and go down memory lane with you on your path to your own most abundant timeline and maybe what that even means for you. But like, yeah, give us the goods. Where did you come from? How did you get here?
Oh my gosh, this is such a great question. It's such a big question because I'm like, Oh, where to even begin? But yeah, I think my whole life I was always drawn to the metaphysical, the esoteric, the unseen world, for sure, the unseen world. And I grew up in a very Christian household. And so spirituality was a very important aspect of our life. And I was always allowed to sort of like push the boundaries and push the questions. And I would start with like, well, are we able to do miracles like Jesus did? And when some people would say, no, no, because Jesus is God. And then I'd be like, wait, but I read in the Bible that it said, we can do even greater acts than Jesus. We can do even better acts, like if we learn how to do. So I would push back on, well, what if being born again actually means reincarnation? Like since a young age, like I'm talking 8 years old, 9 years old, I would sort of just not take everything at face value. And everything was like, I was sort of a contrarian. If they told me one thing, I'd be like, but how? But why? How do you know? And that made me maybe a little bit of an annoying or inquisitive kid, but it's actually like the same trait that has allowed me to create the lifestyle, the business, and the impact that I live now, right? Because everything has been questioned. Like, well, why does it have to take a long time to be successful? Or, why does business have to be hard, right? And so asking the questions really allows us to see our conditioning and our stories that aren't just that, yes, are conditioned from society, but it's also ancestral. It could be past life, it could be karmic contracts, and so on. So when I was 13, I read one of my favorite books of all time, which is Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. And it was about how he was a atheist psychiatrist, and he would use hypnosis as a form of regression work for phobias and things like that, like really traditional clinical way of using it. And long story short, he basically started to go into past lives accidentally and in between lives and things like that. And so I was obsessed with that. I was 13 reading this book, and I remember I was like reading it in history class and math class, and I was obsessed with like just Googling stories about past lives and finding blogs about past lives and all the things. So by the time I was 18, I became a Reiki practitioner. And I was also going to school for psychology. And I figured, you know what? I'm just going to be a therapist. And then, and only when I retire, then I'll have like an intuitive healing business. But I need to make money, and being ambitious was always part of who I was. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to focus on making money. But then a couple of years into schooling, I ended up watching this TED Talk actually. And long story short, it was about how the people who followed what they really wanted to and what their passion and purpose work was were actually happier in life. And the people who only followed a career path because they thought it was going to make them wealthy were less happier in life. And it really spoke to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to be doing the healing work now. Like I need to start a business now. And so I had an in-person practice for hypnosis and Reiki and like all the energy work, shamanic energy work. And then I was a bartender and a bar manager, doing everything on the side to like sort of make it work. And I gained a lot of recognition in person in the DC area, but I knew that I wanted to be online, and I just couldn't figure out how. And so I started to try, and it really was not an easy transition for me, because I was trying and doing every strategy under the book, but I just was not getting any recognition. And it was leaving me to be really bitter and being like, how are these people who have like no background as an energy healer or no background with like clients, they're just blowing up? And I just couldn't understand why. And so finally I started to understand like how marketing worked and how messaging worked. And I started to see a lot of flaws in the way that spiritualists were marketing themselves. Everything from being super, given that our work is often very intangible, it's difficult sometimes for the ego consumer, because I believe that the ego is usually the one that's making purchases because we want to benefit off of something, right? So it's difficult for the ego to sometimes make an investment, a large investment in something that they don't deem as tangible. And so I started to practice and to learn and to experiment with, how do I translate my really intangible work, the shadow work, the energy healing, and all these things, and the reprogramming into, hey, this is how it's going to affect your life day to day. And once I started to understand, oh my gosh, I can figure out this messaging, I can figure out like how to just refine it and be clear and create these systems and structures, it no longer is like me existing in the ethers shouting about my services online. It's like, oh, I can lead through education and I can lead through this and that. And my whole business started to change because I started to focus on like what I call the business assets. So like the value proposition, who your ideal client is. And another thing too for healers is that oftentimes we're generalists, right? Because we can talk about so many different things. In person, I had clients that would come to me about, raising their children or love stuff, lots of relationship stuff, money and career and this and all this random stuff. And so I think most people get a lot of experience talking about a range of topics that to them to be like, okay, who is my ideal client seems sort of difficult because it's like, I don't know how to hone in. Like, I want to help everyone. And then in comes those sabotage spirals that we were going to talk about of like, wanting to prove and wanting to save and things like that. But anyway, long story short, that's kind of a little bit about my journey.
Well, bless the TED Talks. I feel like it's probably a lot of amazing things have happened because somebody listened to an incredible TED Talk.
And it was like an 8-minute TED Talk. And I was like, this is it.
You're like a walking commercial for the TED Talks.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So there's so many things here. Well, first of all, I have to go back. And I think I remember human design, you're a 5'1". Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Projector. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Projector. Yeah. I remember that you were 5'1" because my partner's a 5. Literally, like everyone who's really close to me is a 5'1", and I'm a 3'5". So like we have the 5 line, and the pushing the envelope is a thing for 5'1s.
Yes.
Because you got that 5 line. I myself with the 5 line, but it's more in my unconscious line, right? So I would remember being in catechism. I'm like 11 years old and I'm questioning all of the things that I'm learning. And then at some point I was like, oh, I got it. I'm not supposed to question. I'm just supposed to keep my mouth shut and do this thing, and so there's a lot of issues with that, but it's just really interesting to see how that unfolds when you really, I mean, we are art design, and you could say that the more that we decondition, then even more we can be led by that. But just to see you being guided by that initially is really cool. And so you touched a little bit on some of the challenges that you had. There was a lot there that I think like so many healers can relate to and experience. So I think it would be helpful to maybe go into, you mentioned like proving and saving. Oh my gosh, like those are two huge. We could probably do like a podcast episode on each of those.
I know.
Maybe we start there because I want to get into it, for them, so that the awareness, the illumination can really begin the unraveling process. So when you say proving as part of like, well, first of all, sabotage cycles, what do you mean by that? And then, or the spirals, and then what is proving? And let's start with that one.
Yes. Okay. So, after all of these years of working with clients, specifically like entrepreneurial people who are ambitious, they want, to make a lot of impact and they want to make a lot of money and all these things, I noticed that regardless of income, regardless if they were like just starting off in their business or they're multiple 7-figure earners or anywhere in between, these particular spirals were coming up. And they manifest differently for everybody, of course, depending on their relationship to their business, to money, to themselves, to their awareness, all the things. But to me, a sabotage spiral is this unprocessed trauma that we have. So it's this form of protection that starts to come in. So when I think of like a proving pattern, I'm like, okay, cool. This proving pattern came in as a mechanism to protect us from something, to protect us from whatever upper limits we were going. So I always say this, when you are trying to reach a new goal, right? It requires a new part of your identity to evolve. And in order for that identity to evolve, the same protective mechanisms aren't going to work, right? You have to readjust your protection, and you have to readjust, the what's going to come up for you. So to me, proving is one of the biggest ones that I see. And I've definitely been there. And I would say probably everyone that I've worked with has had this proving pattern come up. So again, when I hear or when I see a sabotage spiral come up, I don't see it as this bad negative thing. I see it more like, okay, cool. This is communicating something to us. When proving is happening, it's really trying to lead us to a gift. It's really trying to lead us to something. And so some of the symptoms of proving in business can look like exhausting your gifts, right? Like not having enough respect for your channel or for your body. And so you're over exhausting your gifts by giving readings to everyone, or by putting a lot of pressure on your channel instead of just using your innate wisdom. It's like, oh, I've got to give it like psychic information, right? So that's coming from a place of proving, or over delivering, convincing. So over delivering can also be, trying, or it could be like going past the hour mark. So let's say you have a 60-minute session going into 90 minutes or more than that, right? Because you're coming from this place of over delivering, which again is coming back to proving. It could also be convincing. So I know for me, growing up on the East Coast, where there wasn't a big population of people who were like mystics or intuitives, and I didn't have a strong community of healers around me. And so when I would go to networking events or things like that, I'd be surrounded by like traditional healers, like doctors and social workers and therapists and things like that. And when people would say, "Oh, so what do you do?" I'd be like, "Oh, I'm a Reiki master teacher, and it's found in the Bible, and it's a laying of hands, and it's actually a Japanese." And I was just coming from this place of needing to prove myself, needing to convince people of my worthiness, of my gifts, of the sacredness of my work, right? And basically all of my sales and all of my whole state of being in regards to my work was coming from a place of proving. I even remember like being treated like a bar trick, right? So if I was out with friends or dinner or something, and they'd be like, "Oh, Nathaly's an intuitive," and the other people would be like, "Oh my gosh, prove it, read me." And I would touch their hand and I would start, telling them information about themselves. And it's like, not only is that such a disrespectful thing to do to my channel, but in general, right? Like no respect for my time, no respect for my process. And I say that more about like I wasn't respecting my time or process. So all of that is coming from a place of proving, over explaining, afraid of being judged. And the way that this can look like in marketing too is aligning with an audience of dedicated skeptics. So creating content
Mm.
with your haters in mind, right? Or creating content with like the people in mind who are going to be like, "Oh, but what about this or what about that?" So you're adding that into your content, which energetically means you're creating it for skeptics instead of for people who don't need an explanation about what Reiki is. They don't need an explanation about what the records are. They're already excited and knowing and willing, right? So that's the difference of how it shows up in our work sometimes. So I know the gift for proving, what's on the other side of proving, to me is embodiment. When you're embodied in your work, when you're embodied in your gifts and who you are, you're arriving to all of yourself. Your power is sourced from within and not needing validation from other people. You're walking your talk, you're going first, you're listening to your body. And you're available to experience other people's discomfort. It's okay if other people judge you. It's okay if other people don't understand. It's okay if it goes against someone's belief system. Like, we get to be comfortable with other people being uncomfortable with us. And the more I could sink into that, the more I was like more embodied in my gifts. And guess what? Now at this point in my life, I don't align, like I don't have interactions with people who are like second guessing me or not understanding. Like, I've co-created a whole lifestyle where, even if it's people who come from a, let's say, more religious background, like my in-laws or something like that, I'm so embodied in my work. I'm not coming from this place of like, they're going to judge me and this and that, right? Because that's unconsciously showing up in relational dynamics. So because I'm embodied, everything is good, right? So that's one of them.
Well, okay. I just need to pause because there's so much here. I absolutely had the proving. And I even had it when I was doing more of the, well, I guess you could call it more conventional. It was functional medicine, which isn't technically conventional, right? But I was over delivering like
Mhm.
so much and giving so much of my time. And part of that was, yes, like I think kind of going into the saving of like, you want to like save the world. And I just want to like, help these people out and give them, especially the ones that didn't have as much accessibility to this sort
Right.
of work.
Mhm.
But then really coming to the understanding of like, I wasn't only sabotaging myself in terms of not fully allowing myself to embody my bigness as a healer, like
Yeah.
who I really was, and claiming it and owning it. And then, that also extrapolating out into my intuitive work in different kinds of ways. But I feel like I I was also creating this loop that would prevent me from growing any further. Like
Yeah.
you said, it came back to that protective of like, I'm just, because that is so unsustainable,
Hmm.
there's no way that I'm going to be able to succeed in this in the long term. So there's a lot of hard truths that I had to come to with that as well. And then when I did come into, I would say that I feel like I'm probably like 99% there. I feel like there isn't like 100% there, right? And then as you just grow, there's always like new levels, right? But I feel like especially with the intuitive work, I have come into a place where even if I'm in a room of people that aren't into that stuff or are skeptics, it doesn't matter. And I remember
Right.
coming into an office where I came out of the spiritual closet
Mhm.
with my work, and I was invited into a doctor's office as a potential nutritionist for this holistic clinic. And he knew that I did intuitive work as well. He had a team of other doctors. And one of the doctors was like super, like left brain, logical. He was into integrative oncology. And he straight up made fun of me in the meeting with
Oh.
everybody, right? Like he was like, "Oh, so you do these readings? What, like can you read our dog's mind?" Because they had like an office dog. So you started making these comments like that. And I think old me would have just like shriveled up, right? Like, and then gone into that proving pattern of like, well, this is where it comes from. And this is like, blah, 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 blah,
Mhm.
the evidence or whatever. And I found myself just laughing with him,
Yep.
and being like, I don't even have to say anything to that. I don't have to respond to that. And I just laughed and I was like, you know what? The right people for me want to work with me. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you'll have those patients in the future. And in the future, he would send those patients to me. I had got like 5 patients from him.
Wow, I
And
love that.
yeah, so I tell that story sometimes to other students and clients because it's like you never know. You never know who is going to be a future potential, referral partner or collaborator, despite the initial, meeting or whatever. So Anyway,
Yeah,
there,
and
yeah.
that's also because you honored yourself, right? You didn't hide, you weren't pretending that that's not who you were around these people. And because you honored who you were, they knew, okay, well, I'm going to send these people to her because I know who she is, right? Like you didn't hide.
Yeah, yeah. And then that level of like, oh, okay, well, I guess there must be some kind of confidence there if
Yeah.
she's not deterring from it, you know? So anyway, it was, yeah, that was really interesting. And that's such a huge one. Okay, the other thing I wanted to say really quick before we move into the next one, and maybe it relates, is this what comes up a lot for our students inside of WIP is the witch wound and like the
Mhm.
fear of being judged or attacked, and
Yep.
how that is very much connected to the proving pattern. But I feel like also it's like this deep web that just like connects to so many things. I bet so many other sabotage spirals as well. Do you see that to be the case too?
Oh my gosh, definitely. Definitely. And what I like to look at it as is that oftentimes we're all just describing the same thing, but with different language. So if it's the witch wound and it's coming from this maybe past life or even ancestral, right? Because I sort of think that that's somehow connected.
Mm.
I call it like the visibility wound. So it's people, I mean, I've definitely have experienced this and I've seen this, oh my gosh, with so many clients in different levels. People who have 200 followers and they're just getting out there might feel the wound super strongly, and just as much as my clients that have 60,000 followers and have been semi canceled before for not performing and the way that the community, quote unquote, wanted them to perform. And so what I've seen is that if you have a story where, not a story, but I should say an experience. If you have an experience where visibility equals danger in some way that's even completely non-related to your business in your childhood, if some form of visibility equated to danger, or in your lineage of women, let's say, if visibility equated to danger, and this we're talking about religious, cultural, ethnic, financial, sexual, mental, I mean, all these different forms, then of course, coming into the online space and going on stories or going live or marketing and of any form could certainly feel threatening to the system, because we're getting on top of like a metaphorical soapbox, or I call it like the auditorium, and being like, hey everyone, come look at me, come look at what I'm selling, especially if people are selling from a place of buy from me, I am worthy, I am good at what I do. I always say you don't necessarily want to sell from the place of here's why I'm worthy, as much as it is here's the value proposition of my business. Here's the value proposition of this offer. When you enter into this offer, this is what you receive, versus work with me as this human and I, because then there's so many limitations to that. And we're going to go into extra protection in that place. So whether it's the witch wound or visibility from childhood trauma or lineage trauma, it's all sort of the same to me, because it's just a matter of who we feel threatened by. Do we think we're going to be canceled by fellow healers or by the opposition, quote unquote, the people who are more mainstream? Like, who, I always say, like, who are you afraid of? Whose judgment are you afraid of? And how is it serving you to feel that judgment? And oftentimes it's like, well, when I feel this judgment, I actually don't post. And then instead I'm just like resting or reading or whatever. And it's like, cool. Then in somehow it's serving you to feel that and to allow yourself to go into that same pattern because you're receiving a benefit from it. And so until we can replace that shadow with form of productivity, so we can get ourselves to a place of resting or learning or creating content without having to feel persecuted in the process, then we're always going to keep it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Ooh, and I just feel like there's many different pathways to uncover that and to work through it, and lots of different names inside the community. Where we talk a lot about shadow work and transforming our personal demons as well as like real demons,
Yes.
all the demons. And obviously, your work is very much focused on this specifically. So, when you talk about embodying, like embodiment
Mm-hmm.
of your truth, of you as a healer, of like the fullness of one's gifts,
Mm-hmm.
what are some initial things that either people can do or become aware of, practices, or just things that that would be helpful for them to know to get there? Because obviously they can work with practitioners to uncover these things, but are there some things that people can start doing right away to begin that embodiment practice?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there are so many things that come to mind, but there's a couple that are, I would say, my tried and true. One of them is using hypnosis personally. Obviously, that's a modality that I love because it it helps me create safety in who I am slash who I want to become. And I think it's a fine line. And this was the other part I was going to say of um oftentimes when I am working with someone's identity, they're like, I just want to be the kind of person that, doesn't care about what people think or is like this or this or this or this. Oftentimes I'm like, oh, this is always who you've been, but you've had scenarios or circumstances that have moved you away from that because of a perceived threat. And so a lot of my, clients, let's say they're like, I want to be outspoken and polarizing and I want to be straightforward and this and that. I'm like, oh, but you're already having those conversations in your personal life. It's just that maybe in the online space or in, your friend groups, you're feeling like you aren't safe to do that because and then we'll find a reason, right? There's like, oh well, when I was younger, my friends, all my friend group like shunned me, or my mom always told me, to be a lady and I'm not allowed to speak this way or whatever it might be, right? And so again, I think there's a fine line between when people are like, I want to become this new identity, I want to become someone who does this, a new person. I'm more so like when I hear that, I'm like, well, that's probably who you already are. We want to look at all the reasons why you aren't that, right? What has
Mm-hmm.
gotten in the way? So I like hypnosis for that because it creates um a safe space for your body. We create the internal environment for that ideal, most abundant timeline, as I call it. And so I like that. And then other forms, something that I do with my clients is that at the start of our container, I'll say, what are some topics that you would love to talk about publicly, but you feel scared to? And I'm like, just make a list. Maybe there's 5 different things you'd want to talk about. Maybe there's 3 or maybe there's more. And I sort of kind of have that as like a sticky note on the back burner because I'm always like, what part of you wants to like what part of you doesn't feel quite safe talking about this? And then what part of you like on our call brings up these polarizing topics and has no problem? And then I'm like, well, let's bridge the gap between the version of you that talks about these things and the version of you that only talks about it in private. And I'm like, what are those traits, right? What needs to be built within our system to feel resilient to the discomfort or to the pushback of whatever might be coming through? Because that's the way that I sort of look at embodiment. I'm like, here's the desires that you have, but here's where you're getting stuck, and why is it safe to have the conversation here but not out there? And then I sort of start helping them bridge that gap a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yes. What's coming up too around this as I'm thinking about like who you already are, and then coming into like, especially in the realms of healership, there's so much that if one truly does want to do no harm, which I hope is every healer, right? There is also that fear that I think connects to the proving piece too of not being in integrity if they don't believe that they can actually do the thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so especially if they're first starting out, they don't want to hurt somebody, potentially harm them. They want to do the best job they can, but they may not fully have the confidence, maybe due to lack of experience or practice of it, or lack of the evidence. So for those folks who are just starting off, who might be falling into the proving pattern, and there's some connection to that, like, I mean, obviously, I would say continue to practice, but do you have any tips to help support them in easing into a level of embodiment that is true and real and authentic, but also an expanded version of what they are?
Yeah. So those are the people that quite like it's not so much the, oh, I'm very experienced, but I'm not feeling there yet. This is like, I don't have a ton of experience and I want to carefully, work with people, but I'm also nervous about like my lack of experience. So, when some of my first clients were in their 60s and I was technically like 18, 19 working with these clients. And I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, what do I have to offer them? What if I don't know an answer? What if I don't have, the right thing to say or whatever it might be? And this was specifically with energy healing. And I think the answer is sort of like you have to start somewhere, number one. And number two, I really believe that all of the clients that we're ever going to have been written before our incarnations, that we have agreed to work with each other in some way or another. The other thing is take yourself off the pedestal of, well, I'm the healer and I'm supposed to have the answers and I'm supposed to be this and this and this. Notice what stories you have behind supposed to. And yes, I think sometimes imposter energy can be really good feedback to, oh, am I someone who's actually really masterful, but my identity hasn't caught up? Or am I someone who really needs further education? And so I definitely think mentorship is a great thing to have at that time, because a mentor is always going to help you answer any questions that might come up for you, or you might feel like, okay, cool, I'm learning from the way that my mentor does this, and it's something that I might use into my own practice. And so it's like, if you're really feeling some of that insecurity, I would say work with someone who can support you as the guide. And then the other thing is, I would notice all the parts of you that are making the process about yourself and less about the client or the experience. If there is a lot more insecurity and, oh, am I doing this right in the session, and it's less about the client or creating a container for God to move through, then I would, I would identify, is there a lack of education and you really just need to do some more education? Or is it something that you can do? Like, one of the things that I do before client calls is that I ask to move my ego to the side to become the clearest channel possible, so that like the highest work can be moved through me. And it's less about my own shortcomings and more about, just use me, God, like use me as the tool for this transformation today. So yeah, I think a couple things there.
Really, really powerful and amazing reminders. I think that those are useful at all stages, right? Because we can all get caught up in all different stages of our path, our healership, our careers, especially as like we just go through the various seasons, and ups and downs. So I think that's really, really supportive. Okay, I have like so many more questions there, but I do want to get into a second one before, because we only have an hour. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Because I think that the saving one is also really important, unless you feel like there's another sabotage spiral that you actually think is like even more prevalent and would be supportive to talk about.
Oh my gosh. Let me think. I think um they're all so good. But
Yeah.
let's go into proving, and then if we have time, maybe we can do another one. Um,
You mean
so,
the
or
saving?
I'm sorry,
Because it's a,
saving. Yeah.
okay.
So with saving, how it manifests, cutting your prices at sales objections. So if someone's like, I can't afford that, and it's like, okay, well, here's 50% off. And it's like, there certainly is a time and place where you can be flexible. And there's certainly a time and place to, um, you know, make the sale as easier as possible. But if every single sale looks like you cutting your prices at any objection, then we're likely moving into saving, because we're saving the client from the discomfort of not having the funds or feeling like they don't want to maybe take out a credit card or whatever to find the funds, or you're saving them from the discomfort of something, right? And so we're saving. The other could be offering outside of your genius. So that's like saying, okay, what I offer in this container is that I'm an energy healer and I'm going to help you, heal and let's say heal your nervous system. Cool. But then all of a sudden they're like, hey, can you help me with my website? Can you help me with it? And you're like, okay, okay, okay. Only because you're doing it to justify your prices or justify, working with you. And so we're saving instead of saying, I have a resource for that. Another one is overloading your schedule with low ticket, right? So this comes back to, and by the way, a lot of these spirals, they all communicate with each other. They're all, you can have several, of course, operating at the same time. And so you'll see a little bit of overlap. So overloading your schedule with low ticket could look like, coming from a place of wanting to be accessible to everyone. So now you're working with 30 people in 1 month, which is not great for your channel, for your body, for your nervous system, when really you could be working with less people at a higher price range. But we're doing that because, again, we want to be able to heal everyone and help everyone. But oftentimes it's like you're eating last, and that isn't sustainable for a healer in the long term, a healthy healer. Crossing time and energetic boundaries. We talked about over empathizing at the cost to you. Again, like if your client is like, oh, I can't afford to pay you this month or the next month, but can I still use your services? And by the way, I've heard of that happening at every income level. I have a 7-figure client who has had that experience where they're over empathizing at the cost to them, but it actually is more difficult. It is more harmful when you are earlier in your business and you don't have a consistent income, to be able to say, okay, yeah, you don't have to pay me this month or the next, isn't sustainable because your bills aren't on a sliding scale, right? So I personally feel that your time and your energy and your resources should be respected in the same way that other people respect any other financial commitment. And what else? So feeling responsible for every dip your client experiences, that was huge for me. I remember
Mm.
feeling like, oh, I remember it was my first like contract long-term client, and it was at the end of our I think it was 3 months. And she was wonderful. It was great. We had a wonderful experience, but I sort of felt like, oh, but she still hasn't moved all the way to California and, quit her 9 to 5 and all this stuff. And it's like, well, you know what? Like maybe that's not going to happen in 3 months. Maybe that's going to take longer. And so I sort of felt like, oh, but she's having a bad day. So that means like I must not be doing something right. And it's like, no, these are humans. These are sovereign people. These are adults. We're all adults. We're all responsible for our own experience. And we are guiding and facilitating in the best way that we can. But at the same time, everybody is on their own timeline. So as much as we're there doing, our end of the bargain, it's still up to them to integrate what we're doing or take action in what we're saying, or, whatever it might be. And if they don't, then that's their timeline. That's the way that they're operating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just share, I think one coming up for me that I realized to what I used to do, because I used to offer some long-term programming that included unlimited access to me through like Telegram or some sort of messaging app. And in the beginning, people like would come to me with their emergencies at like 9 p.m., right?
Uh,
And like head on fire kind of thing. And I used to feel like it was my responsibility to coach them through, to put out that fire. And then eventually coming to the realization that like actually you're doing a disservice to everybody by
yes.
always showing up right away, because I wasn't giving my client the space to connect with their own faculties of like problem
Yes.
solving. How do I save myself out of this?
Yes.
And so then I started waiting until it was my work hours.
Mhm.
And then when I would get back to them, they're like, oh, no, I figured it out. After it was like level 10 emergency, it's like they figured it out.
Mhm.
So I was like, oh, okay. So they are really smart and capable. Of course they are, right? Like
Yep. Yep.
they can figure it out. So that was part of my saving that I identified.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think I still have those moments where I'm like, oh, a lot of my clients are on different time zones. And so if they're in Europe, I'm receiving their message at a different hour, or if they're in
Mm,
Australia or so forth. And so I'm like, I'll see the message and I'll maybe see like the preview of it. And I'm like, oh, darn. And then my heart, of course, is like, oh my gosh, like, let me read it, and then I have to be like, nope, put my phone on do not disturb. It's 10 p.m. my time, like whatever it is, they are adult and sovereign and resourceful enough that it'll, my input will be best served and best used at 9 a.m. tomorrow. So, yeah, I definitely have had those moments too where I'm like, okay, Nathaly, like you said you're gonna do this, so like gotta maintain it. Um, but yeah, and and on that same topic of uh the like phone boundaries, or like the messaging boundaries, I think it's the same as um sort of just feeling that pressure to heal your client to perfection.
mhm.
And like, oh, we're in this container for 3 months or 6 months, so we're supposed to solve all of these problems. But it's like, actually, sometimes things do take longer. And there is virtue in longevity and in taking our time and not rushing the process. I think, again, what I was referring to before of like, is this container more about me and my ego than it is about the other person and the space that we're creating for God, Goddess to move through? Because if my ego is heavily involved and needing to get a result and forcing ourselves and forcing everything we need to do in this short amount of time, it's actually going to be a disservice to the quality of our work. And I always feel like you need to have room for divinity to move through you. But if you're only doing things from a place of ego, it's gonna be limited. And I think that's really sourced from saving, like wanting to save the person in order to feel good about ourselves and about our own gifts. So yeah, rescuing your clients from uncomfortable feelings, not being honest with your client in order to be loved. That's another one that they want to sort of just validate whatever their client says, like, yes, yes, this is going to happen for you, or oh yeah, this person that's come into your life, yeah, it feels really good. Like they're just saying whatever is going to appease them in the moment because they don't want to have the conversation to be like, actually, you keep attracting the same person. Like, let's talk about why that's there, instead of like giving them the real tools. So, on the other side of saving, to me, what the gift looks like is security. What you're really trying to receive when you're saving someone is security, right? So, only working from your genius, aligning with clients who take self responsibility, strong boundaries with yourself and others, acting as a guide. Acting as a guide rather than the martyr savior like type of dynamic, hierarchy, guru, honoring the vision, giving back to yourself, allowing yourself to receive abundance, right? Because again, if we're saving them from the discomfort of not investing high ticket, or of saying, yeah, you can have my services for 2 months for free, right? Like that's actually communicating to the universe, like, not only do I not respect my bank account, but I'm not in relationships with people who respect my bank account or my time or my energy. And so to me, what you really are trying to communicate is security. You want security, and that's why you're saving them, because it's easier to just say, yes, yes, that's all fine. And in the hopes that they're going to pay you in the third month or whatever it might be, instead of being like, well, I'd rather lose a client than not be paid for months, right? So that's where like you're really trying to get to security, but you have to understand that security is going to look different than like the false timeline of what it looks like. So yeah, that's what saving looks like.
I love that point about you just made a distinguishing how did you put it? I'm trying to remember the false timeline, right? So like the actual timeline of what security looks like versus the false timeline of what we might create in our heads. Could you give a quickie example of that?
Yeah.
Because I just to make it a little bit more tangible for people.
Yeah. So I think that's like in this case of security, it might feel more secure to feel like, oh, I've got clients scheduled on my calendar. And so that makes me feel safe, even if they're not paying me what I think the service is worth, or if they keep canceling, or if they, haven't paid me in the last month, or they keep getting major discounts. It feels safe to just have those clients on there than to be in your most abundant timeline, which would look like having quality clients who love and respect your prices and who show up to the call and who are doing the work. So the false timeline is trying to trick you into feeling, yes, yes, everything is secure, but you're not actually in a place of abundance. Versus what I call the most abundant timeline is where you actually have abundance and quality and spaciousness and all the things that you're desiring. So I think we can sometimes trick ourselves in order, again, that's what the sabotage spiral is trying to do. It's trying to keep you in the same place. It's trying to keep you from going up the mountain because they deem the top of the mountain or the journey there to be unsafe. So that's why the sabotage spiral keeps us in that loop of like staying in that same false timeline.
Yeah, and I think, well, at least what I hear from a lot of the students in my group, there is, especially when starting off, like they may be a practitioner, but kind of changing things up or coming out of the spiritual closet, like coming out in a new and different way. And so it feels very new, and that there's a tough time that they might be having discerning which is the false timeline and then
Yeah.
what is their reality right now. You know what I mean? Like without feeling like they might be, oh, well, bypassing in some sort of way, right? Like I have the bills to pay, I have these kids I got to feed. This has been my bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping onto this other vision is going to look completely different and totally rocking that security boat that I'm on. And so I think there's a lot of challenge in discerning like what the pathway to that most abundant timeline of security actually looks like.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that if you're in that split, if you're in that place of like, well, I can keep doing what I'm doing, or I'm going to try something completely different. I always look at everything as like what feels like contraction and what feels like expansion. If you are on a current timeline that your mind is saying, well, this is safe because I get this paycheck and I get this and I get that, and this is what I know, but your body is in contraction, then you are on the false timeline. Because even if you have that mental safety, because you're like, oh, well, I know what's here and I'm going to get this, but your body's in contraction, that is the false timeline. That's scarcity. And if you think about the other timeline, the other pathway, and there's some excitement and there's some expansion, you're like, oh my God, I could do this and this and this. But the mind is like, no, but there's going to be there might be a dip in income, or what if this, or what if that, or what if the third. But if your body feels expanded, then I would go with what's expanded, because I always feel that your oracle body, your body is so much wiser than your mind, because your mind is just a program. It's just a collection of data that we've decided is a program, and it's either serving you or not serving you, whereas your body is the channel. So if your body is feeling expanded, considering a different timeline, I would always go with the body.
I love that advice. And, you know, it just makes me think about, especially if one is going into entrepreneurship or going onto a path that is totally different, there's going to be mind fuckery happening. Like, it's
Yeah.
just like part of the deal. Cause I feel like it's also a spiritual path. It's a
Mhm.
growth for our spirit, especially if you're called to do this work, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, so I guess it's almost like expect that there's going to be, I call it mind fuckery. Like in my own mind, I don't, I
Yes.
don't necessarily
Yes. I
talk about it.
love that term.
Yeah. Cause I think like even, and sorry if there's little kids around. I mean, I didn't give you a disclaimer, but like even just thinking about fucking and how that is a creative act, right? Like
Mhm.
it shakes
Yeah.
things up and it's creative and there's like life that can come through that. So
I
it's
love
just interesting.
that. Ah, that's so beautiful. I really love that. Oh,
Well,
wow.
I was just really feeling into that today as you were talking, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So maybe the next time that we all experience mind fuckery, we actually get excited and turned on by
Yes.
it.
And like life can breed from fucking, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine, guys. It's fine.
Oh, that's good.
Oh my gosh. Well, we don't have time to go into the other ones, but I just want to give people a little teaser because I know that you also offer, you have your offerings. I want to share what is available and how people can connect with you more. But if they can learn more about these sabotage spirals, and if you want to drop like one or two of them just to kind of, you know, wet our palates a bit about what to expect and what to look for.
Yeah, so I have a whole workshop on this on my website. So I go into it's very in depth because I go really into all of these. But like we talked about saving, then there's competition, which is a interesting one that people oftentimes don't really like to admit to, but I'm happy to admit to it. And then we also have like working with linear time versus the quantum,
Mm,
imposter. We talked about proving, ego is a really good one.
hmm.
Perfectionism, self-abandoning, which I see a lot in
Oh my
healers
gosh.
and
Yeah.
women in general. And then the last one is the criticizer. So always like being able to point out the flaw, but never true, like getting stuck in a place of pointing out what's wrong, but not leading a new way. So yeah, I really find that like regardless of where you are in your process of entrepreneurship, this is just really super helpful to keep in mind. I always keep them like on my sticky note on my desktop because it like it's a reminder to be like, okay, Nathaly, where are you operating out of right now? And I
Mm.
see it as not like a box to check off, be like, oh, I'm healed now. It's more like a spiral, right? It's this like it's a spectrum of where am I in this process? I'm in my upward spiral or am I in the shadow spiral? So yeah, people can find that workshop. It's called Illuminate on my website. And yeah, other ways that people can work with me. I have a certification program all about blending the unconscious mind with energy work and creating customized hypnotic tracks for your clients. And also, I have Oracle Business School, which is about blending energetics, reprogramming, and then putting that all into a new paradigm business strategy for healers, leaders, and disruptors. It's a 5-month mentorship and mastermind where you scale your business to your first six or multiple six figures.
Amazing. And I did the GVM. I loved it.
Yes.
And I've used it and I have some tracks inside of our program. And it's just,
Amazing.
yeah, I just went to town with it.
Good.
Right away. I tell you, like jump on, and I'm a
Aw.
manifesting generator, so I'm just like, let me just do it, go
Yeah.
through. But anyway, it's been really supportive, and I'm inspired to create my own personal tracks just for me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, because I heard you really talking into that, and how you create your own tracks, you work through like your different levels, and I feel because I was Yes, I'm all about mentorship, obviously, right? Like, I love coaches. I've always had coaches and mentors, always, always, always. And I feel like there's so much value in listening to our own voice and dreams and
Oh yeah.
reminding ourselves of that. So you inspired me to do that, and I'm really excited
Oh,
to get
I'm
started.
so glad. Yay.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's, because oftentimes like when we adopt narratives into our unconscious, we, might hear it from someone else. We might hear it from our mom or our dad or whoever, but we start to hear it eventually in our own voice. So when we can reprogram and have it be in our own voice, and by the way, I actually learned this, I teach like you're basically you're when you're doing the customized hypnotic track, it's like, and you are now experiencing this and this and this. And then only when you're doing the affirmations, it's like, I am this, I am that. Well, something that I learned from Shaman Durek, who's this amazing shaman that I really love, he says when you're reprogramming, you can do it as you are this, you are that. And so that's already how I teach it in hypnosis in the GVM certification, because when we adopt belief systems, we're hearing it from the outside world as, oh, well, you're just really this, you're just really that. And then we start to internalize it as, right, I am really this, I am really that. So having it in your own voice is like very next level. So I'm very excited
Mm,
for your process.
me too. I'll share updates. I'll share updates as it
Yes.
happens. Oh, amazing. So I know that people are going to reach out, and I'm so happy to have you. I feel like we need to do like a whole nother thing either on the podcast or
Yes.
maybe come back, have
Yeah.
you doing a class on messaging. Because when you were talking about that in the very beginning, I was like, oh, I know I'm going to get so many questions about this. So,
Yeah.
um, but of course, you have so many resources. I encourage everybody to check them out. And I ask everybody who hangs out with us on the Future World podcast this last question, which is, Nathaly, what is currently feeding your wild, whether that's body, mind, and or soul?
Oh, okay. Let me think here. Or maybe let me feel into it. What is feeding my wild right now? Um, it's gonna sound really simple, but I think what after we've been nomadic for, 2 years, and I think what's feeding my wild is the idea of like grounding into one home for like a while. And
Mm,
like something that I've been doing just off and on is Pinteresting like really beautiful home decor. Like I'm also a Taurus, so that makes sense. But yeah, really beautiful home decor and design, and like experimenting with different styles and even different clothing styles. And yeah, that's just really feeding my wild right now.
I love that. That
Yeah.
yeah, that's so perfect. And it's so Taurian.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, Nathaly. Well, thank you, darling, so much for coming back on and into our community. And I'm excited to see what grows from here for you and for
Yes.
me doing your
Yeah.
method.
Oh, yay. All right. Thank you so much for having me. Sending you all the love.